possible action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So under statute, the director is responsible for preparing the department's biennial budget for consideration by the legislature. That budget is due to the governor's office at the end of August. And part of the statute requires the director to consult with the commission in preparing that budget. At our last meeting, I gave you a brief presentation of some of the budget concepts that we were looking at. I can update you on that today. It was my intention to have some preliminary numbers for you and have these concepts fleshed out a little bit more than we have them at this point due to some staffing shortages that we've had in fiscal services. We're not quite there. I'm happy to report that we're pretty much fully staffed now. I can come back in August with some hard numbers. That will be about 2 weeks before our deadline. But I think more important than hard numbers is getting any buy-in or feedback on the concepts that we're looking at for budget enhancements. So I can go through these and provide you some updates in a little bit more detail than I provided last time. Now, as I said, the statute requires a director to consult with you. You could choose to take no action today. You could choose to take action to support some or all of these concepts, or disagree with those concepts, or just provide informal feedback, as you should choose. So looking at the list that you should have in your material, we had 10 concepts, and I believe the preliminary list was a little longer. There's some things that we've whittled down. I don't have that in front of me, but I'll just go ahead and go through this. Our number one concept and one of our biggest priorities is urban bear management and education. We are still fleshing out the details of what needs to be included in this. We already have taken some steps to address some of the ideas that were in our original concept, such as adding a seasonal helper for Carl Lackey and our game wardens to help deal with the urban bears. We've already added that. It's really a combination. This concept is really a combination of covering existing staff costs, which would be our game wardens and our biologists primarily, as well as some of our conservation education staff, as well as adding some enhanced resources, enhanced staffing resources, as well as education and outreach, pamphlets, brochures, educational videos, things of that nature. We will be asking for general funds to cover these costs. Currently, any of the work that we do for urban bear management and education is being funded with 100% fees, sportsman fees. We do not use federal grants for that work. That this type of work isn't permissible under our federal wildlife restoration grant. Our general fund request last biennium, when we had a similar decision unit, was about $250,000. That request was supported by the governor's office at the time, but very late in the budget process it was cut by the budget director as they were going through and attempting to balance the budget. I don't think there was any intentional rejection of the concept. It was just they had to make the cut somewhere to balance their budget, and it hit the cutting room floor and never got to be considered by the legislature. I know Director Wasley is currently working with the governor's staff to make sure they understand this concept, and we're going to take another run at it, and we're optimistic that we'll get it included in the governor's budget. The next item that's on the list is license process streamlining. This really we're looking at enhancing our websites, making sure that they're mobile device friendly, developing phone apps to facilitate the sale of licenses. How much of this is actually going to be in a decision unit, we're still trying to work out. There's a couple of things that we're looking at. One is making our current NDOW website mobile device friendly. You can certainly look at it on a phone, but it doesn't size properly. We don't really have a mobile device interface. We actually have our webmaster actually working on the design for that now, and we can do that in-house, and there shouldn't be any enhancement in the budget for that piece, although there may be other things that we can do to enhance the website that might be included in that budget request, but we'll at least get the initial design to make our site mobile-friendly in that request. We also need to update the consumer site, which is run by SCI, to make sure it is mobile-friendly. We need to get some quotes from SCI to do that. I'm not certain at this point whether we'll need to enhance our budget or whether we can cover it with our existing budget, because our contracts with SCI do include some contingency amounts for programming and system changes, and these aren't really big dollar items, so we may be able to cover that with existing resources as well. As far as apps, we may have the expertise in-house to do some of that. I've had some discussions with vendors about developing apps. The costs are not very high at all. Maybe a few thousand to a few tens of thousands of dollars. So if we determine there's some enhancement we need to do to our budget, it should be pretty modest. Item number 3, the Department of Wildlife Scientific Database. Some of this we are already pursuing. We currently have a biologist position. This is a position that had been vacant for quite some time because the funding for it ran out, and we actually are doing recruitment for a biologist that has database expertise. We've also brought on some seasonals, and their focus is getting the mule deer collar data. We've been putting out a lot of mule deer collars, and these people will be synthesizing all that data and putting it in a database. What that will leave for a budget enhancement could involve additional staffing resources, but will likely involve a contractor to help us design a database and at least properly identify our needs. I don't think that's going to be a really big ticket item either, but it gives us a basis to start to have a really good scientific database. Item number 4 is Department of Wildlife headquarters consolidation. Really what we're focusing on now is asking for additional funds to lease office space in Reno to move the headquarters staff currently occupying Valley Road out of Valley Road and combining them with the other headquarters staff that are in lease space currently into one office that we would lease. My estimates for cost for that range between $100,000 and $200,000 a year in additional lease expense. We would continue to occupy the current Valley Road office as a Western Region office. We would make some modifications to that office to make sure it's being fully utilized. And that issue, I think, is really important to us internally. Bringing together all of our headquarters staff creates a lot of efficiencies. While Valley Road was being renovated, we leased space together, and it was extremely beneficial. We really saw the value of doing that. It's very difficult to conduct business across divisions when you're across town. It's really helpful to just be able to go down the hall and talk to people. The next item, number 5, is Spanish outreach and marketing. We're going to take a modest move in this direction, starting really with translation of existing materials and signage, and try to pursue opportunities to market to the Spanish-speaking community. Item number 6, the mining program. Currently, the mining program generates about $250,000 a year. That money is generated through industrial pond permitting and assessments on mining companies based on the tonnage of ore that they process. This currently only applies to the hard rock mines, does not apply to other types of mines, lithium mines, for example. We have been in discussion with the Mining Association about changing regulation Doesn't necessarily require any statutory change, but just changing the regulations and who these fees apply to and how the fees are calculated. We think we're getting buy-in with them to do that, so we're going to be pursuing some regulatory reform to broaden the fees and raise additional funds. At the start of the current fiscal year, which was last July, fiscal year 2014, we had a reserve of about $478,000. We are burning through that money pretty quickly. We use that money primarily for staff time, primarily the Habitat Division, mining biologists, and their time in reviewing industrial ponds and doing project review for mining companies. And we have been using some of the money for projects, for on-the-ground projects. We've consulted with the Mining Association on those projects. These tend to be projects that are of interest to them and that we don't necessarily have a lot of other money for. Just a couple of examples would involve BATS or Golden Eagle surveys. There's just two examples. There's quite a wide range of projects. And the other item that these funds are being used to fund is the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council and Technical Team. That is new in the current biennium to use the funds for the council. There is about $200,000 of these fees being allocated to the council for the current biennium. And I know they are looking at ways to fund the council in the next biennium. No decisions have been made, but we're also considering that and trying to generate more money from this program. The way we are currently spending money, if we don't reform the fees and broaden the fees, we will be pretty much out of money by the end of next fiscal year, which is June of next year. The next item, number 7, the elk damage program. Excuse me. Much better. We do have a bill draft request submitted for the elk damage fee. The elk damage fee is currently set at $5 for each elk tag. That money is used to fund our elk damage program. That primarily consists of damage payments to landowners. It also is used to mitigate damage. In particular, one of the big ticket items is to build fencing around agricultural fields to keep elk out. That program currently generates about $160,000 per year. At the beginning of this fiscal year, we had a reserve of $581,000. This current year, we're on track to spend about $400,000. That's more than we've spent in quite a few years. Most of that is because we took a very ambitious fence building program this year. We just got a work program approved at IFC that would give us about $200,000 to spend on elk fences in the next fiscal year, which starts July 1. We may be increasing that. There's not an urgent need that we're going to run out of money very quickly, but if we continue to sustain that high level of fence building and program expenditures, at some point we will. If we continue to do that consistently, at some point in the next biennium, we would be running very low on funds. So the BDR request gives the authority to the commission to raise that fee up to $10, and the current cap is $5. So we may have some budget adjustments in our budget request related to that program. Item number 8, restricted funds enhancement. That really is a technical budgeting change that would allow us to fully budget for, based on the available funds, for project money, for restricted project money. The two best examples that I can give you, you considered early this morning, duck stamp and upland game stamp. Those are two examples of restricted funds. The way the budgeting process works, we don't normally have an opportunity to make any adjustment, and the amount of money that's available is based on the amount of money that was spent in the base year. So if for some reason we didn't spend as much money as we thought, we end up being stuck with that amount going into the next biennium. And usually what happens is after you all approve these projects, we do a work program. We go to the Interim Finance Committee of the legislature, which only meets every 3 months, and then we get the budget augmented. It could cause delays, and it creates a lot of extra work. We do have agreement with the budget office to be able to take these special funds and just increase our budget based on the available funds and how much we want to spend each year, even if we don't yet have projects approved for that. So that will help us streamline things and hopefully ensure less project delay. The next item is our capital improvement projects. Capital improvement projects go through a little bit different process. They're technically not part of our budget. We submitted a list of projects to the Public Works Board. The Public Works Board will consider those. Well, first of all, the Public Works Board staff will cost out those projects, and then the Public Works Board will be meeting in the fall to prioritize and make recommendations to the governor on a statewide basis of what projects to include. But just very briefly, the projects that we submitted in roughly our order of priority is an Ely office expansion. Our Ely office is full to the gills. We actually took our conference room and have split it up into office space due to the lack of staff, or lack of space. And that office was built, it was designed for expansion, and it's high time we do that. The next priority is headquarters planning. This is not about leasing facilities. This is about building a brand new headquarters building in Reno, possibly headquarters in Western Region. That will be a very long-term prospect. What we're asking for here is funding just for planning. So if that's approved, we go through the next biennium, 2 years of planning. The following biennium, if it gets approved again, they would authorize funding for design and engineering. Then possibly the following biennium, assuming they keep approving it, we would start building. I mean, this is 6, 8, 10-year type of proposition before that would be done. The next item is Las Vegas office. This also has been in the planning stage for quite some time. This is a multi-agency office that's been planned, housing both wildlife as well as several divisions of conservation and natural resources. Next item is Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area office and shop. Those facilities are in badly need of upgrade. And then the last one is the Overton office and storage. The Overton office, their current office, is actually a modular unit that we've been leasing. The modular unit that we had actually caught fire and burnt, and we're actually replacing it with another lease space. We would eventually like to get a proper office built there, and they are in desperate need of more storage. They have heavy equipment that's just stored outside in the elements, and would be a lot better if we had some covered storage for that. There also are some minor things in our requests for the existing Las Vegas office, a new HVAC system and roof. Obviously, if they approved a new Las Vegas office, we might reconsider that. We wouldn't be getting both. And then we also have a request for statewide asbestos abatement. We have asbestos in a lot of our old facilities, and it's pretty common for us to ask for that. Item number 10, question 1, authorization. Again, this isn't specifically part of our budget, but part of what we'll be pushing for in the legislature. This is 2 different things. This is under the current existing law. There is an additional $3 million in bonds that could be sold to go to the Department of Wildlife. We need the legislature to approve that as part of the state's bonding capacity. And we are also seeking new legislation to basically reauthorize Q1 so that there be additional monies available to sell bonds in the future. And a couple of other items that aren't on this list that I should have added that we're also looking at. One is for the Conservation Education Division, and that is a contract videographer. We have a tremendous amount of video footage that our staff have taken, but we don't really have the capacity to have somebody sit down and edit it into, commercial quality videos. We did have some discussions about adding staff. We want to take a little smaller bite and maybe bring on a contractor to convert some of those into commercial quality videos. And the last item is for the fiscal services section, some additional staffing resources. We have an audit that will be coming out that looked at our operations, and based on the findings of those that audit, we are going to be found deficient in contract management and fleet management. These are issues that I've been grappling with as long as I've been at the department, and we just simply don't properly manage those with existing resources. So we'll be looking at adding some staffing resources to make sure that we're adequately addressing those areas. And that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Commissioner Drew?
I got just a couple. Patrick, is this kind of in any kind of prioritized order, or are these just concepts in kind of a random order? I wasn't sure.
I wouldn't say they're in strict priority order, maybe rough priority. I know urban bear management is really one of our biggest priorities.
Right, and that makes sense. And some of the other ones maybe I thought would be higher up on the list, but I can talk with you offline on that. And then I guess one of the other questions I had is number 4 and number 10 at all related? I mean, is there the potential of using bond funds in the CIP provision to help with the headquarters office, or is that two totally separate animals? Or
well, number 4 is simply to lease space. That's an operational expense, so no, that wouldn't be included in 10. Long term, though, about building a headquarters building, that's certainly a possibility. Q1 funds have been used for capital projects. Definitely a possibility.
Any more questions, Commissioner Drew?
I guess the only other one I had is on the Q1 stuff. You talked about the potential of maybe a new BDR to authorize a kind of a new program going forward. Mm-hmm. And I know that was discussed maybe over the last 2 sessions, and it seemed like early on there was kind of a coalition of folks who were willing to kind of back that, and there was some momentum there. Is that something you're getting the sense that there's multiple groups that would be willing to kind of make that push or that ask for you, or is this something that the department's kind of pushing on its own? Or
we're talking to DCNR about it currently, preliminarily. We're all interested in doing this. We'll certainly have to build a coalition of people to get behind it if we're to be successful. I'm not personally aware of where that work might be. We're just kind of having some early discussions about how to approach it.
Any other commission questions? Commissioner McNinch.
So Patrick, I don't know if it's finalized yet, but the state wildlife grants, have we heard news from the feds on if they've approved and at what level?
I don't remember where that stands. I remember talking to Laura about it, but I don't.
At one point, I know it was around 50 million, I think, is what they were talking about. And it's been, what, 60 to 80 the last several years. So I know it's kind of being proposed at a lower level, but with those reductions, maybe it's too preliminary to ask these questions. Maybe we need to wait a little bit longer. I don't know, but what's the general fund appropriation look like for coming up? I know you don't have hard and fast numbers, but are you getting any indication at all?
So far, based on budget instructions, it would be at the same level as what we currently have, which our current funding is just under $500,000 a year. It's still very preliminary. They have economic forums to go through and a lot of decisions to make. But in terms of how we're preparing the budget, we're being told to hold the baseline funding.
Any other Commissioner Drew?
just as a follow-up, I mean, is that something, the state wildlife grants, I know are pretty critical, is that something that's already built in, or is that something we want to add to the list?
It's still built in. I should explain that 90% of our budget, 99% of our budget is just based on base year expenditures. So state wildlife grants, all of our existing programs are all automatically included. And this is just sort of the major changes that we're looking at. And I could have printed out the whole budget book and all the line item stuff of all the existing things, but I didn't think you wanted to see all that, so.
Any other commission questions or comments? I'm gonna need to get a boater safety flag for the end of these guys so I can see if they're raising their hand. Seeing no questions. As for possible action, let's go out to public comment. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Anybody got a stab in a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we don't necessarily need one. We just, at this point in time, I don't have any recommendations of any kind, and it sounds like we're going to get some more information in August, and maybe we'll have opportunity then to provide a little more input in both ways. So.
That'll work.
Mr. Chairman? Over here.
Commissioner Bliss, I'm telling you, we need a flag or horn or something. I don't know.
What about a motion for the county advisory board budget request for that funding? Do we need to make a motion on that first?
We did.
We did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're good.
All together.
Before we moved on to C, we were there.
Yeah.
We got that under B.
Chairman Rob?
Commissioner Macbeth.
Patrick, during the Great Recession, you'll have to remind me of where we were on our general fund monies. My recollection is that it had gotten up to like 2.7 million or 3.4 or somewhere in that range, and then it came down to where our current level is. And obviously those were tough times, but now we're coming out of the recession, and I'm sure the state is doing better. And I'm just curious if there's been any discussions of increasing. You're indicating that it's going to be the same, but is there going to be any discussions of increasing the general fund, portion of the budget now that things are getting better, or is this going to be where we're going to be for the foreseeable future?
For the record, Patrick Cates. At our height of funding, which was, off the top of my head, this was fiscal year 2006 or 2007, we had an appropriation of $1.7 million. That was a combination of regular general fund and tourism dollars. I think the general fund portion was 1.2. It was cut and eroded, as you indicated, whittled down to a little less than $500,000. I think the state is very cautious about adding additional programs. So far, our discussion has been to hold the line. Our instructions, I should say, has been to hold the line at the current funding level. I know there are numerous demands on the state for funding. One of those being employee pay. We are still under furloughs. The price tag for fixing that is, I don't remember the exact number, but it's in the tens of millions of dollars of general funds. And I know on the whole, the state's going to be looking at trying to restore some of those things, and I'm sure some program expenditures. For our part, what we are taking a look at is that urban bear management request, another $250,000. A lot of the funding that we lost used to go towards urban wildlife issues. We have pulled back quite a bit from dealing with those issues. We now only deal with issues where there's clear a public safety threat to public safety. So we're still dealing with bears, mountain lions. We don't respond to a lot of lesser intensity type of calls. We direct people to our website for information. We want to get back there to that, and part of our strategy with this urban bear management request is to make a a fairly small ask to increase our general fund. I mean, if we got that, our funding would go from roughly 500,000 to roughly 750,000. So it's certainly a step in the right direction, and part of our case and argument for this is that it is part of that urban wildlife issue, and if we can build on that, then maybe in future biennium we can argue to get some more of that money back. That's our current strategy anyway.
Commissioner McNinch?
And I guess that's where I was headed with my questions a little bit is, you know, these state wildlife grants in the past, and I'm sure it's still the same, I think they were reducing the match requirements, but if I'm not mistaken, there was I mean, you had to have general fund money to take advantage of the state wildlife grants or to maximize what was allocated for the state. And, you know, I'm all in favor of the bear stuff, but at the same time, there might be a balancing act there where, you know, if we're putting a tag on money, general fund money for one particular aspect, we should make sure that we're able to utilize that state wildlife grant and match whatever money we can out of that. I'm assuming that we have stuff covered under the Wildlife Action Plan for bears. I haven't read it for a while, so I don't remember what's in there. But I guess the point is that if the argument's better to bring in more money because of the grant that's available than it is for the $250,000 to you know, my mind is just an awareness issue. You know, which string do you pull first, you know? And I don't know. I think we just, maybe time will help out a little bit here.
If I could just comment on that, currently all the general fund that we do have is being used as match for state wildlife grant in Section 6. It is almost covering all of that match. Not quite. We have been having to pull a little bit of license dollars into the wildlife diversity budget account in order to ensure that we have match for all of that. Fairly small amount, but we're kind of treading water.
That's my point, is it'd be nice to max that out and use that as our argument, and then if we're able to maybe it's in conjunction with the bear request, you know, I mean, maybe it's another thing that we could put into the argument is that we need to maximize that take. It's there for the taking. It's ours if we match it. So, which it sounds like you're already doing. It's just ideally it would be with general fund money. So.
Yeah, we're certainly leveraging the currently available state wildlife grant funds, primarily with general fund, and where we can't, it's a little bit of license dollars, but we're definitely using all that's available to us.
Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chair, we did talk about this issue in the in some respects in the Finance Committee meeting about the urban bear issues going, you know, particularly, we certainly have issues in southern Nevada in terms of wildlife management and maybe trying to make that a little bit bigger. And I think Patrick talked about doing that. So we're really not just talking about it as a northern Nevada bear issue, but also trying to address some of the southern Nevada wildlife management issues as well. So, I mean, I would hope that we would try to deal with those issues in terms of that pile of money that we would be asking for.
With the with the new discussion through OFWA with the Blue Ribbon Panel that's been set up to try to have discussions on excise taxes for something other than, you know, so it's not, things aren't coming out of PR and DJ and Walbro and stuff where you have the non-consumptive users paying their way for wildlife management for wildlife purposes. It's going to be more important to push that, you know, if something comes from that eventually, to push that general fund, because you know, you're going to want to have the ability to do that. I don't know, I just see where there's some real opportunities coming down the pike, and you know, we're always 3 or 4 years lag behind recovering in these government agencies. I've worked for one, I understand it, I get it, you know, and priority is getting staff back on track. I mean, you guys are talking furloughs still, for God's sake. That's brutal, you know. So their priorities are we're not there yet. In 2 or 3 years, and you know, you're talking about living by the skin of your teeth for a little while longer, hoping that we can clear some of these other things up so we can get healthy again. And you see these opportunities coming down the pike that, and you just hope that we're in a position where we can do it. I know that's beyond all of us for the most
If I could, just to follow up on that, particularly to Commissioner Lane's comments. We did talk about that in the Finance Committee. We are proceeding with an abundance of caution in what we ask for, because we know there's not a lot of money to go around because of the issues that you just talked about, Commissioner McNinch. I don't think at this point that we are intending to ask for any more general funds beyond the urban bear piece, recognizing there are a lot of other issues, but what we submit to the governor is probably just going to include that. But certainly when we present this to the legislature as well as to the governor, it'll be in the broader context of urban wildlife management. And should the powers that be over at the legislature decide that there's additional money available, we'll gladly take it for other urban wildlife issues. And there's certainly a lot of clout from Southern Nevada in the legislature, so that's certainly a possibility, and we'll certainly be talking about it.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, it's 10 after 12. If we all ask everybody where we're going for lunch, we all end up the same place, we won't make it back. So let's try to disperse. There's a Burger King and Subway in the north end of town. There's a Mexican restaurant. If you go down the Main Street, turn north, it's on the right. You have the Mizpah and you have the station house, so spread out, we'll all make it back. Let's come back at 1:30.
They discussed it, so I'm not going to go to Burger King. I'm sure that's where.
Order a hamburger. You need to take the burger